I've always enjoyed the arts, so when I saw arts-based research as an option for our assignment, I thought it would be interesting and engaging. I was not wrong. As I explored ABR, I found that a consistent message was the importance of audience in research. Thus, I thought what better way to approach my own presentation than to consider the audience, all of you, my esteemed colleagues. With you in mind, I decided to approach this presentation as an enticement to you, while still adhering to the rubric, of course. But I wanted this to be an opportunity to spark an interest in ABR and the possibilities of it being a methodology that you use in your own research. So, without further ado, I present
Arts-based research,
also known as ABR.
Now, there is no universal definition of arts-based research. Dr. Diane Conrad, in the research video, speaks of ABR as an emerging methodological approach in which it is against the grain to be too authoritative. She speaks of it being an umbrella term for a number of approaches that combine scholarly inquiry and the arts. I came across this umbrella analogy several times in my research. Susan Finley states, the term arts-based research cannot be reduced to a prospective set of methods for generating and representing empirical materials. It is more of an umbrella term for many methodologies that follow from a constructivist, emotive, empirist research aesthetic. While I did not come across a universal definition, I did find many definitions that helped in my understanding. Here are some of the highlights. Arts-based research prioritizes the study of human multidimensionality while simultaneously raising critical consciousness, invoking public accessibility, and invoking embodied transformation. Arts-based research can be defined as a systematic use of the artistic process, the actual making of artistic expressions in all of the different forms of the arts, as a primary way of understanding and examining experience by both researchers and the people that they involve in their studies. And my favorite, at the heart of arts-based inquiry is a radical, politically grounded statement about social justice and control over the production and dissemination of knowledge. By calling upon artful ways of knowing and being in the world, arts-based researchers make a rather audacious challenge to the dominant, entrenched academic community and its claims to scientific ways of knowing. In addition, arts-based methodologies bring both arts and social inquiry out of the elitist institutions of academia and art museums and relocate inquiry within the realm of local, personal, everyday places and events. Now, with all those definitions providing a little insight into ABR, let's dip our toes into the history of it. In all of my research, a constant name drop was Elliot Eisner. Throughout his career, Eisner encouraged social scientists to accept artistic ways of knowing as complements to science and urged acceptance of narratives in the forms of novels as desirable manuscripts for doctoral dissertations, and adaptations of music, dance, and poetry as forms of research representation. When Eisner first proposed inclusion of the arts in research, it was a new way of thinking for many researchers. However, today there is much more acceptance for ABR. In Chapter 44 of the Handbook of the Arts in Qualitative Research, Knowles and Promislo will highlight North American examples of institutions that support arts-related thesis and dissertation research. So now that we have some working definitions, we've dipped our toes into the history, you must be all set. Complete understanding. No? Still have questions? I thought so. Just like you, I also had and continue to have many more questions about ABR. In the following section of my presentation, I will address some of those questions and the answers I found.
what is not arts-based research?
I want to start with this question because sometimes it helps to understand what something isn't in order to understand what it is. ABR is not using a form of art as a way to appeal to a participant or to build rapport. Nor is ABR simply discussing art via an interview process or showing art and getting participants to reflect on it. As Patricia Levy explains, these approaches would still be in the realm of traditional qualitative research. You may be adding a piece of art to it, but you are still essentially embarking on a qualitatively driven project.
What exactly is arts-based research?
Once again, I defer to Dr. Patricia Levy, as I appreciate her explanation of ABR, particularly for its simplicity. She explains that ABR is researchers in any discipline adapting and employing the tenets of the creative arts in their research project. They may use the arts for one phase of the inquiry or for the entire project. Now, I must insert here that this is not an agreed upon assertion, that the arts being used in one phase of the research is enough to constitute the research as ABR. In some of my searching, there was the belief that this fit better under the definition of art-informed research. However, I prefer the simple explanation offered by Levy that if the creation of art is present in any of the phases of the research, it constitutes ABR. Sometimes it's the participants creating art or the researcher or both. Sometimes it's during the data analysis or the collection or the dissemination of the data. But as long as it's being created, it constitutes ABR. Another and identifying characteristic of ABR is described by Sean McNiff in Chapter 3 of the Handbook of the Arts and Qualitative Research, Perspectives, Methodologies, Examples, and Issues. He describes giving the art its autonomy, and I find this really, really interesting. It's working with the art itself as a creative partner, conveying a sense of respect for its existence. I really like this as it exemplified for me what much of the research was saying, that in arts-based research, art, in all of its forms, is more than a means to an end, but rather another participant in the research.
What are the philosophical underpinnings of ABR?
Conrad, when asked about the philosophical underpinnings of ABR, identifies art-based research as best fitting under new paradigm research, and that it differs from approaches within a scientific paradigm when we look at the question of what is truth. In ABR, there is no one truth, but multiple contextual truths. The aim of ABR is to get insight and understanding into the human experience, rather than to seek an absolute truth.
What kind of art is used in ABR?
The answer to this question is all of it. Every single medium that you could possibly think of can be used in arts-based research. From dance to music to poetry to writing to photography to tattooing, sculpture, that's just to name a few, beading, weaving, anything that is creation can be used in ABR.
Is ABR only used with research questions that deal with artistic expression?
This question was in the back of my mind while researching, and luckily I came across a wonderful answer with an example. It was from Sean McNiff, and I'll share it with you now.
Using art-based research methods outside the circumscribed area of people already committed to artistic expression can be a challenging yet intriguing prospect. Let me try and give a possible example based on my experience with percussion in groups. We might ask how sustained rhythmic expression with drums can help people to transform conflict in organizations. The basic premise of this possible study might be that drumming and rhythm can connect people to forces of transformation and insight outside the realm of rational thought. How do the physical vibrations, energies, discipline, and physical expression of drumming alter our relationship toward particular phenomena? Can a creative process such as drumming be more effective in transforming a conflict than verbal interventions? How does the drumming activity further letting go, inspiration, focus, safety, and the power of the group slipstream? When difficulties in human experience become deeply lodged within individuals and groups, this is usually a sign that we are stuck in our ways of dealing with them. A shift in methodology can bring tremendous insight and relief. The process of drumming and the use of our hands, bodies, and other senses, as well as the activation of dormant dimensions of the mind, may offer ways of solving and revisioning problems that are simply not possible through descriptive and linear language. The art-based researcher asks these questions and then sets out to design experiments and situations that will further understanding of the phenomena. Does the researcher need to be an expert in the art medium to engage in ABR?
There are differing views on the level of expertise required to be held by the researcher in respect to the medium being used. However, a common stance is that highlighted by Dr. Conrad. She identifies that the researcher, before embarking on the research, should have one of three things: either an established arts practice, or having had learned an art form prior to the research, or lastly, will work alongside an artist who will help them develop the research in an artistic way.
What is the role of the researcher in ABR?
I came across many references to the role of the researcher in ABR. Most identify the researcher as participant. Conrad identifies the difference between the role of the researcher in scientific research, where the researcher is an objective, neutral outsider, and within ABR, where the researcher is connected to the research. There's a personal connection, a personal investment. I appreciate this commentary and find that it ties in nicely to what Susan Finley so beautifully stated in Chapter 6 of the Handbook of the Arts and Qualitative Research. She said, "It is the arts-based researcher's role to integrate themselves into the community of participants and learners, and to initiate introspection, reflection, and representations that teach. Arts-based researchers should ask, does the representation seem authentic to the community of participant practitioners?" Finley goes further into the role of researcher and speaks to the responsibility of arts-based researchers, stating, "In the current historical moment, arts-based researchers have an opportunity to consciously reject research practices that are implicated in colonist traditions of objectivity and that treat production of knowledge as a function of social privilege. In response to current social pressures, focus is shifting to a different set of questions, such as how can research generate social change? Arts-based research is a political movement in the making, and as do all movements that challenge prevailing authority structures, it attempts to broaden access to power. Its future depends upon how effectively its defenders stand against aggressive assaults to its purpose." And thus ends my questions. Well, not really. I still have many questions unanswered when it comes to ABR. However, I have come to understand that ABR is what I would call a living methodology because it focuses on the human experience. And as humans are continuously growing and evolving and shifting, so does arts-based research. Questions surrounding ABR rarely have a black and white answer because ABR lives in the gray. It's difficult to label, and that's the point. Continued growth calls for continued learning. So I encourage you to take a look at the references I've listed in more depth if you think ABR is a methodology that you would be interested in using. As for me, the more I learn about this research methodology, the more I want to use it. Through my research, exploring Indigenous women in educational leadership, I want to change societal expectations around leadership in education. ABR is an ideal methodology for social change. As Susan Finley states, it is time to affirm a people's pedagogy in which arts-based research is performed for the purpose of unveiling oppression and advocating social transformation. Arts-based researchers must focus on the inherent promise that artful representations have the capacity to provoke both reflective dialogue and meaningful action, and thereby to change the world in positive ways that contribute to progressive, participatory, and ethical social action. So while I'm not exactly sure what my study would exactly look like using ABR, it definitely is something that I want to pursue. And I keep thinking of the blanket exercise. And if you're not familiar with the blanket exercise, it was started by Kairos, and it's an interactive activity that involves props and scripts that takes participants through 103 450 years of colonization or 500 years of colonization. I'm a facilitator for the blanket exercise, so I've participated as a facilitator many times and then also as a participant. And I keep thinking of it in terms of my research, and I'm playing with the idea of modeling the study around something similar to the blanket exercise in that format. So that's something I want to continue looking at, and especially looking at it under the umbrella of arts-based research. So I really hope that this has been informative for you. I hope that it's enticed you to look further into arts-based research. And if you have any questions, please look at the resources that I've listed and feel free to contact me anytime.
Created using Powtoon.